Stephanie Bain, I have a books. I'm a book nerd. There's so many books.
Hello everyone, Stephanie here. Today's video is gonna be me explaining to you how I rate my books. Now, I have a video like this from a very long time ago, but I don't really like it, first off. And second off, I've changed it. So even if I have a second video, that one's slightly irrelevant too, and I'll probably just like private it or something. But I don't think there's another one. I think I attempted to film this, but it didn't come out the way I wanted to, because the thing is there's like multiple things to ratings. This first part is how I rate my books, and I do want to eventually in the future do another video of how important ratings are to me, how important they are to you, and yada yada yada. So this first one is just me talking about the things I look for when I'm rating a book. And I have, first off, 5 things I look for, because, well, there's 5 stars. So I have it written down here because I don't want to, it just started raining. I don't want to word it differently or anything because, you know, I have an issue to do that. So in no particular order, these are the 5 things I look for when I'm rating a book. Writing style, plot, characters, the world, and the way in which the story was actually told. And I'll go into depth a little bit more on each of them. So those are the 5 things I look for. Writing, the way the words are put together, if the sentences flow, do they go really nicely, does it feel jumpy? You're totally gonna hear that. Second is the plot. Like, is there a solid plot to the story? Can you tell what it is? Is it something that gets diluted as you go along, or does the plot just keep getting stronger and stronger as it goes along? Because I've read books where, one good example, Divergent, I feel like the plot slightly got lost as the story was kept being told. I thought it was really strong in Divergent. Insurgent, it starts getting a little jumbled. Maybe it's just me, that's just how I remember it, but I'm using that as an example. And then there's books like Red Rising, for example, where that has one solid plot, one goal, and that's how it is throughout the series. But then you also have books like Outlander and even The Glittering Court, where the series or the book takes many different directions because the plot grows and it's like the plot keeps continuing, and then you get to that one plot point, and then it changes into another plot point, so on and so forth, but it all flows cohesively. So depending on what type of plot is set up, I look into whether the plot was strong. Are there things missing to the plot? Well, this is a good plot, but there's a hole in it, so on and so forth. When it comes to world, I think was the next one I mentioned. Characters, are they shallow? And when I say shallow, I don't mean shallow like that person only looks like, skin deep, no. I'm talking shallow like, is there any depth to the characters? Are they like a little tiny pond, or are they the depths of the deepest parts of the ocean? I personally like characters that have a lot more depth to them, and because you want a well-rounded character, or at least I do, even if it's just for a fun read. I feel like your character should be more than just the fish need more water to swim in. But do the characters have depth? How are the characters' growth as the story goes along? How are the characters' interactions with one another? My phone is just going on. But how the characters interact, is the character development, is it strong? Or is the character just too whiny and annoying? Or is the character just unreasonably I look for things like that. The world, even if it's our world and it's just a contemporary, for example, is it vivid? Is the description well? Is it a little too... I even actually go ahead and tie in the timeline sometimes, because it's part of the world, like the way the days pass in the story and stuff. But is it vivid? Is it something that I had trouble imagining in like some fantasy books, or just some books where it's our world but it's slightly different? Like, am I able to imagine it, is my question. And the last one being the way the story was told. I'm not talking about the writing style, but the way in which the author, put all of these things together to create the story, the timeline, everything that happens. It kind of like ties everything in together. And it's just like, let's say the story was great, but there was just some things that were out of place. I felt like if you switch this or you switch that, it would have been a lot better. Or was just the way the story was told was great, and even though there was this one part I disliked because it just kind of felt out of place, it made sense as it was going because it goes with the plot and stuff. So those are the 5 things I look for when I'm reading. Those are the things I pick up on. But I don't deduct a whole star if, for example, there was a tiny little part of the world building I thought was weird. Like some books, it would have benefited from having a map. I would take off a 0.25 from that. I am one of those that does the whole, you guys know that though, 3.25, 3.5, 3.75, 4. That's how I rate, because I feel like just because there's an issue, let's say with the characters were slightly shallow, but I really did enjoy the development as the characters grew along, went along. Or I thought they were shallow, the development was a little studded, but I liked the interactions between the characters. That's 2 things I find wrong. So if that was the only thing I found wrong, depending on how big it was, let's say for example, it would be a 4.5. So that's kind of how I rate. I mean, I don't think that's that complicated. I don't know. It's complicated to explain because it's a lot of things going through my mind. But that's what I look for when I'm rating a book. I find that ratings are actually sometimes extremely difficult, sometimes extremely easy. Sometimes it's like, oh my god, the book was so good, but it just didn't. I didn't want to give it that 5. Kind of like Lady Midnight. There was a couple issues, but those issues were so small on the grand scheme of things. I really did enjoy Lady Midnight, but I could not give it a 5 stars because there was a couple of things, but none of those couple of things mounted up to taking off a half a star or a full star. You know what I mean? It also just depends on what the author's trying to get across. If it's a light, fluffy read, or if it's something that has more meaning to it, although I think any book can have meaning to it depending on what you're looking for personally. But it's how I interpret it. I read Wild Swans and I thought it was such a simple but such a heavy book all at the same time. I thought it was perfect and there was nothing wrong for me. Even if a book doesn't mean to be heavy, it could still be the perfect, fun, amazing read. Holy crap, it sucked me in and I thought it was just so great and I loved it. It could still be a 5 star. So, first off, I don't compare books to one another because no book is alike in the sense where how the story's told, because when you really break it down, yeah, they might have similar plots, but everything else can be different, So that's just how I rate my books. I feel like if I talk too much about it, it would start getting confused. So those are the 5 things I look for. That is how I break down my ratings and whatnot. But I will definitely be doing another video where I am talking about how important ratings are, but that's more like a discussion. This was just me explaining to you how I rate my books. But also, I just feel like maybe it'd be helpful. So then when I give you guys my rating, you understand, because obviously I talk about why I like or dislike a book, but I don't go into depth. But at least you can now understand when I say I had this little issue, it's oh, that's why. Even though a lot of people, first off, we're all different. So everyone's rating will never be alike. No one's rating will ever be the exact same. 2 people can give the same book 5 stars, but for completely polar opposite reasons. So that's just that's just how I rate my books and why I rate them, what I look for. What are some things that you guys look for when you're rating a book? Is there something you weigh more heavily than others? For example, the writing style to me is a huge thing. How the writing flows, how the words are put together, how they just kind of, pop off to the page into my head. So, what do you guys look for more? What's important to you? What do you think is irrelevant? What are those things that you just don't really care about? I don't mind tropes, so long as the tropes are used really well, for example. But I hope you guys enjoy this. I hope you guys let me know what you look for in ratings, or this was even slightly helpful. It's just something I wanted to talk about. So, I don't know, but I'll see you guys in my next video. I was going to see you on my next day. I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!